I'm going to tell you a story. And the story is about somebody who lived in ancient Egypt. And I'm not going to tell you what this person's name was to keep you in suspense and to keep you watching so that you see this until the end. And then I'll tell you what their name was. And yeah. So enjoy the story. But again, you don't get to know who it is until the very end. Sorry, but it's just the way it goes. So the story goes like this. This person lived in ancient Egypt, of course, as you know. This is Egypt, right by the Red Sea. Easiest place on earth to find. Like that. And this person lived in ancient Egypt before things started to look how you might envision ancient Egypt. Yeah, like this. And that stuff. Gold jewelry. King Tut's tomb. Yeah, well, we haven't seen that yet. I get it. But that was covering King Tut's tomb. Solid gold. Incredibly valuable. Before those were built, this guy, who I'm, again, not telling you his name, lived before all of these things that are commonly associated with ancient Egypt and the riches and all the awesome fancy things that people had back then. He lived before these things showed up. And, you know, even before he lived, Egypt was a collection of small little tribes. They were actually nomads living in these areas along the fertile Nile Valley where crops could be grown. And eventually it's like a couple together maybe would combine. A strong leader from one of them would go to the other and take over. And that's because people are just naturally a little bit, you know, power hungry. People want power. People want land. People want control because that makes them feel so good. And that's how it went. Things continued in that way for quite a while in ancient Egypt. Small little kingdoms taking over one another until eventually enough rules needed to be made where we slowly start to see governments and then we call them kings. Oh, hey, here I am. And with king leadership, people had regulations and laws and certain structures to their life, kind of like Hammurabi. He put in laws. And we started to slowly see this happening in Egypt. And eventually what we have is two halves to Egypt. We've got Lower Egypt. What? Lower. Wait a second. And Upper. Now things are really getting weird, right? Why is upper underneath lower? That doesn't make any sense. If you say you're going to put something on the upper shelf, it's usually on top. And I've been making something online that I'd like to show you that I think might be kind of nice because I'm in the process of making a three-dimensional Nile. And the reason that in the south it's upper and in the north it's lower is because, well, water, like all of us, we obey gravity. We don't really have much of a choice here on Earth. And if you see, if you see on here, here's the Nile River, right? It has two rivers that combine to make the one. That's called the White Nile. This one is called the Blue. But eventually, right around here in a city called Khartoum, they combine, and here's the Nile River flowing ever so beautifully from the south to the north. And the thing with this is, now as I flip it, and it gets three-dimensional, it flows that way because it's higher up here. elevation is higher. There's mountains in the south of Africa, and water starts there in 2 lakes, and because of gravity, it flows downhill like this. So this is called upper because it's higher. Lower is over here. Because it's lower. Amazing when things kind of make sense, isn't it? So, in Upper Egypt, there was a king, and in Lower Egypt, there was a king. 2 kings. Now, this guy whose name I'm keeping completely secret from you, he was the king of Upper Egypt. And very powerful, right? He controlled half of Egypt. There was another king, though, with troops and soldiers and people to take care of. In the north, here's your directions. But we call it Lower Egypt because it was lower. And eventually, the leader, who I'm telling you about right now, he wants to unify all of Egypt. Not have an upper and a lower, and not have one in this and one in that anymore. So what he does is, and there's some dispute with how he did it, but there are pictures like this. And this is the guy, by the way. This is the person whose name I'm still not telling you. In artwork, I'm not sure what he's doing, but it doesn't necessarily look very friendly because people don't always agree if this person took his troops up into Lower Egypt and attacked and took over aggressively, or if he went to Lower Egypt so nicely and he negotiated and he talked things through and eventually he became the leader of all of Egypt and he unified all of Egypt. And that's a really great thing, but we can't be certain if he did it aggressively or if he did it friendly. Some things we just don't know, huh? Regardless. Now, I'm wearing a headband here with nothing on it except it's a color, right? It's white. The king of Lower Egypt, he would wear a red crown. So me, this guy, he was the king, as I told you, of Upper Egypt. So let me try this. The crown color signified where they came from. Lower, red. Upper, white. A picture might help. I'm going to show you that in just a second. That's why this crown is white, because I, or the person I'm telling you about, was the king of Upper Egypt. The king of Lower Egypt would have worn a crown that was red. Kind of cool. And they looked like this. You see the shapes. So you tell me, which Egypt were these two the leader of? Think it through. I'm wearing white. Where was this king the king of? Upper or lower? How about the red? Where were they the king? Upper or lower? Let me know about. Hopefully this is what you were thinking. Yeah. Upper Egypt in the south, that king wore a white crown. This guy. The king in the north, he wore a red crown. Like that. Now, eventually, when this guy unified all of Egypt and took it under just one single control and was in charge of every person living in Egypt, he did two things that showed everybody, and he sent the message that he's not going to favor the people where he came from. No. He's going to treat everybody equally. So he did two things to show peace and unity and solidarity for all of Egypt. Here's the two things. One of them is he moved the capital. This is an illustration of a city called Memphis. And he moved the capital to Memphis. Memphis was pretty much in the middle of the two kingdoms. Memphis is roughly right there. He could have kept the capital where it used to be and rule from there, but he moved the capital of Egypt to put it in the middle so that the people in Lower Egypt wouldn't feel neglected or wouldn't feel any less Egyptian or less important than the people of Upper Egypt, where this guy, whose name you still don't know, came from. So he moved the capital to the central middle part, and that city is called Memphis. And he did one other thing. You know this crown? This is an Upper Egypt crown. Upper. Here. Upper Egypt. They wore a red crown in Lower Egypt. So he did something with his crown. Can I show you? He didn't want to just wear his white crown because that's an Upper Egypt thing. Let's see if I can make this look like a dual crown. There we go. He started to wear an all-new crown, and it's pretty sweet. The real thing would have looked like this. But instead of showing favoritism and sticking with this crown, he wore a dual or double crown. This is before King Tut, and it's before the pyramids, and it's before paper was invented, and it's before everything that gets associated with ancient Egypt. And it's such a little known part of their history. And this guy who unified Egypt and let it become what it became, oh man, I wish I could tell you what his name was. And this is kind of awkward, but I forgot his name. See ya.